Yeah, go for it, go for it. If anyone else needs a note card, there's some up here. I say that with a caveat. I highly recommend that you all do not copy the note card as I am doing it, because I am not going to be space conservative. It's better for you to wait for me to finish the note card, see everything that should be on it, and then plan how you want to fit the stuff on there and how you want to do it and all that kind of jazz. So, for today, let me make sure the stream is actually working. There we go, great. For today, we're going to finish up the current and resistance PowerPoint. I expect it to take about 40-ish minutes maybe. And then we'll start working on the note card. We may or may not finish the note card today. Just a heads up on the note card. So, it's a 5x8 note card. For those in class, obviously you can see I have it. You can come grab one. Here is what you are allowed to do to this note card. You are allowed to write anything and everything on the front and the back. You are allowed to type up stuff and then cut it and like glue it or staple it. What you are not allowed to do is you're not allowed to make like a flip book with a bunch of paper stapled to it that you kind of go through you can just see how it's kind of counterintuitive. My whole goal is to give you all space. I mean, this is basically the size of a sheet of paper. If you have a normal sheet of paper, it's like this, one of those. But then I don't have to worry about going around and making certain no one wrote anything on the back of their sheet of paper. So it's just like the space that would fit on a single sheet of paper. During the test, you are allowed to bring this note card. You are allowed to bring a calculator. You're going to want to bring a pencil. I highly recommend not using a pen. I will have scratch paper here for you. And let me point this out as well. There is going to be multiple choice problems. You do not need to bring a Scantron. Okay, so let me just show you all this because this is what your test is going to have on it. It's landscape, so it's all sorts of crazy. There's going to be this thing, it won't be cut off. This is in landscape form. I just want you all to see this. The back page of your test, I will repeat this when we have the day of the test and I've handed everything out. I'll try to be super quick so you have as much time as possible. The back sheet of your test will be the Scantron. So you literally will just rip that off. You'll just rip this last page off. You do need to put your name and your UCF ID. This is, I'm going to repeat all this test data, but just so you all know now. On the Scantron, you need to put your name and your UCF ID. That's a 7-number ID that's on your ID card. You will also need to put that on the test itself. So on the front of the test, it will say name and ID. On the Scantron, it will say name and ID. Why am I making you write it twice? It's because there's the free response and the multiple choice. The multiple choice, I will collect all these Scantrons myself, and I don't know if it says it on here, probably does. ZipGrade. Yeah, instead of using UCF's Scantron grading things, there's an app called ZipGrade. It's great. It lets me get real-time feedback. Basically, I scan them instead of UCF scanning them, and it lets me see which problems do this, whatever. It's quicker for me. But the free response, those packets will go to the grader to grade. So I will take all the Scantrons, the grader will take all the free response. I need names and IDs on both of them so I can put the grades in. So you'll have your name and ID on it twice. I will be able to upload at least the multiple choice question, like how you all did a multiple choice, like by that Tuesday. So that will give you some sense of how you did on the test. I won't be able to upload the free response until the grader finishes it. I'm hoping they're done in 2 weeks. I still am awaiting their reply to my email about grading. So there's that. That's with the Scantron, 25 questions, so on and so forth. I sent out an email to you all today in the announcements. I promised you that I would send the rubric and all the details. So everything I've been saying to you all is kind of on here. I have the exams on Thursday, 2/16. You can bring any calculator. You can't use your phone calculator for obvious reasons. You can bring that 5x8 note card with writing, no loose papers attached. We're going over that. You do not need to bring a Scantron because it'll be the last paper on your test. The exam structure with the rubric, all the stuff I've already talked about, so I'm not going to repeat it all. But the thing that's new here is because we have extra time on Tuesday, I sent out a survey. It is a very simple survey. It's literally one question. Is there any questions or concepts that were particularly challenging, that are still particularly challenging for you? Type it up however you want. I'll look through these before Tuesday. I'll see which ones had the most common responses, and that'll help me to make the review on Tuesday more useful for you all. Okay? If you don't have anything, great. Don't put anything. There's not going to be any clicker questions on Tuesday, so Tuesday's just review. I will be here. We will be doing it. If you miss it, you're not going to miss points, but if you're here, I will be trying to use your all's feedback to give you the most useful review possible. And then Thursday is the exam itself. Generally, after class, so we're going to have an hour and 20 for it. I know the first 5 or so minutes is going to be me getting you all the tests as quick as I can. It's going to be me quickly reminding you all of the details. There's generally not a class after this, so we should be able to make certain I can give you that full hour 20. So if I take 5 minutes in the beginning, you can stick around 5 minutes after normal class time to keep working on the test or whatever. Like, that's the hope. There's never been anyone that's come in here after. I don't expect that to change. So benefits of a later class is that we'll have that extra time, so make certain to give you all the full hour 20 minutes that is promised. Okay, any quick questions before I get into the stuff for today? Yeah. Sure, yeah. Go ahead and make certain. Yeah, that's easy enough. Bring your CFID so when you turn it, I can just check it. That's a great idea. Yeah. Anything else? Cool. All right. So let's go ahead and start with the stuff today. First thing on it is something I promised you all. It's just a more organized slide. This will be uploaded at the end of class today. So I promised you all I'd have a better slide for current. Here it is. So we already defined current. Everything that's on here is stuff I already talked about, but it's just more organized. So current, we said, is the flow of positive charges, even though they're not actually the ones moving. The unit for current is amps. That was one of the big motivators for me making this slide. The unit is amps. So if I say how much current I have, I solve a problem and I get 3, I'm going to put an A after it. The unit's what goes after the number. The variable is a capital I. I put in parentheses capital I because in Arial font, a capital I looks like an L. So that's just why it says capital I there, just to make sure that you know that's not an L. Boom, capital I. So in any equation when we see current, you're going to see that capital I as the variable. So the variable is what goes in the equations. The unit is what goes after the answer. For current, the unit is amps. The variable is I. The equation is how much charge over how much time. So just basically a more organized version of some of the content that I previously showed you all. So to recap what we covered last class. Last class I connected voltage, current, and resistance. So I defined what current was. It's the flow of these positive charges. I told you the reality is that it's, yes, current is defined as positive charges, but the reality is it's actually electrons going the other way. And then we talked about resistance already. Resistance was a material's tendency to slow down current. And then I connected it all together saying voltage is like height. So just like we have that table with the marbles, I said, how do I make all the marbles move? I lift up one end. Now there's a difference in energy between the two ends, and they all roll down. So instead of for height, we have voltage. And we say we introduce a voltage difference. That's going to cause all the electrons to move towards a higher voltage, so you get this current. And that came up with Ohm's, and then Ohm's law comes on in, and Ohm's law relates them all together. V equals IR. Voltage equals the current times the resistance. So if you have a battery with a certain voltage, we did a problem with that. It was pretty straightforward. If we have a battery with a voltage of 5, and we have a resistor of 15, that resistor gets the full height difference, that full voltage difference. And so if you want to solve for the current, you take that voltage, you divide it by the current, or you divide by the resistance, and that gives you the current, 1/3, and then we put that amps after it for the unit. So, pretty simple equation, no fuss, no muss, V equals IR, Ohm's law. Very useful. It's called a law because it's so foundational to electricity and so foundational, just an observation of reality. All right, so the new stuff we're going to talk about today is power. If you all, hopefully power should ring a bell in your head somewhere from Physics 1. Power is the energy per second. The amount of energy lost or gained by a device every second. So this is Power is the same thing that you learned about in Physics 1. It's the amount of energy gained or lost every second, but this just happens to be lost due to electricity. So power, the definition, electrical power is the amount of energy lost or gained by an electrical device that current's flowing through. The units are watts. So anytime you've bought a light bulb or any device in your house or home or apartment or wherever you may live, if you saw 50 watts, 30 watts, 100 watts, it was telling you how much energy that's going to consume every second. And I use the word consume here very loosely. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. I'll talk about that in a second. The units watts, which is joules per second, the energy used per second. The variable in our equation is P, and the variable P in the equation is PIV. It's a nice way to remember it. P equals IV. And you see I wrote it 3 different times. I wrote P equals IV, I wrote P equals I squared R, I wrote P equals V squared over R. How did I get all those? I'll derive one of them and leave the third for you to see. Third for you to find. So P equals IV. Okay? That's kind of our OG equation. Well, I just reminded you all that last class we learned about V equals IR, Ohm's law. So if I just take where V is and I put IR in instead, so V equals IR. So V equals IR. I just replace that V with IR. Ta-da! Look, you got the second one. What's I times I? I squared, and R is still R. Ta-da! Look, there's a second one. You all can derive the third one for yourself if you'd like. To get V squared over R, instead of replacing V, replace I. All of those equations just come from using V equals IR and putting it in terms of the different variables. And the derivation for how you get power is really simple as well. Energy is Q times V. If we have a change in charge or a change in time, that's current. That's the definition of current. So where does this equation come from? I'll rewrite it. It's in calculus terms down here. So let's just use it in terms of our change. Change in energy over change in time. Well, we remember that the energy equation is Q times V over change in time. We'll remember that change in Q over change in T. Let's just put those together. That is the definition of current. Bam, there's your derivation. Again, you don't need to know that, but remember, everything in physics is built on previous stuff, so it can sometimes be nice to see that. Some of these derivations are kind of harder to appreciate until you've been doing it for a long time, and you're like, oh, it all makes sense. I can see all the behind the curtains. For now, just worry that P equals IV. Whenever you all see derivations in any physics class, if it makes sense to you, awesome. If it doesn't, that's okay. I'm not going to test you on derivations. Okay, so why is this important? And this really gets down to why is electricity useful? And this is an interesting thing that I think what I'm going to mention here is something that only really occurred to me this year. What is special about electricity? Why do we value it so much? The easy answer is it powers everything that we use. Look in this room, look how many things we're using that are powered by electricity. The lights there on the ceiling, the projectors, the internet that's streaming this, my phone, my microphone. Gosh, I think that's really most of it, but there's plenty more things. Air conditioning, yeah, the hidden one that we value so much in Florida. Everything is powered by electricity. And so what's special about that? Well, if we think back to the idea of energy, everything in the universe can be described as energy. We cannot destroy energy, we cannot create energy, but we can change forms with energy. We can take energy and convert it from one form to the other. And that's all you're doing with electricity. At no point are you all using electricity to shock things, which is maybe the most pure use of electricity. At no point are you going around zapping things with, maybe you are. I guess a taser is a pretty good example, but you're probably not tasing the people. What's the use of electricity then? It's kind of liquid energy. It's a way to transport energy miles and miles and miles from one location to another. And then what do? Once it gets to that location? You convert it to something useful. Light, heat, sound. That's really what electricity is useful for. It transports energy over long distances and lets you then change it to something that you actually want to use it for. air conditioning, lights on the screen, heat. So it's just kind of an interesting idea to think about. That's all electricity is. And so we need to understand electricity because we use it so much. But at the end of the day, why is it so valuable? It just lets us transport energy. How else would we transport energy over large distances? Would you heat up a vat of water and then transport it somewhere? And then, I don't know what you would do with it there. But it's just such an efficient way to transport energy. So just an interesting idea to think about. And how much energy are we using every second? Well, that's what the power company is charging you for. And I'll teach you all how to kind of calculate that and where they're getting those values from if you pay your power, if you look at your power bill and see some of those things. So let's do a really simple problem to begin with. What's the power loss of the resistor? What's the power loss of the resistor? So let's try this out. Let's see. It's got to ask if I want a screen cap. Oh, that's why it's so slow. Boom. All right, so what's the power loss? I have a 5, it's the same exact circuit as before. I have a 5-volt battery. I've used this notation last time. I don't know if I clarified this. It may be obvious, the fact that it's voltage, maybe not. This is a symbol for a battery. The long end is the positive end. The small end is the negative end. And this little doodad down here is just the symbol for a resistor. That's how we draw them in circuits. Why do we draw them that way? Because they're really easy to draw that way. Instead of drawing a battery like the way it looks, that took me a few seconds. This took me 1 second. It's just more efficient. Same thing with the resistor. A resistor, it's really easy to draw a squiggly line. So, convenience, right? A lot we do in physics, a lot we do in engineering at the same time. Efficient. All right, so you got 5-volt battery, 15 ohm resistor. Calculate power. I will put all 3 equations up here in the off chance that you do not have them down. So P equals IV, P equals I squared R, P equals V squared over R. Choose the one that makes your life the easiest. Through the power of Ohm's law and P equals IV, you can do any of them, but if you just choose the simplest one, then save yourself some time and energy. Alright, give you all about, go to 2:05, so 10 more seconds. And we'll go to 2:10, as you see people still walking around. Alright, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright, so, what's given? In our problem, we are given voltage, and we are given resistance. Voltage is 5 volts, resistance is 15 ohms. We are solving for power. And what equation are we going to use? Well, we got 3 choices. Let's pick the ones that got the variables that we have. We have V, we have R, so I'm going to choose the one with V and R. Plug and chug. V squared, so 5 squared over 15. It's going to equal 25 over 15, common multiple of 5, watts. All right, so don't worry. First practice one with this. It's normal to kind of be a little thrown off, but 5/3 watts. Plug in a calculator, 25 by 15. I don't know, that comes out to kind of a gross 1.666666 for her. So leave it as a nice fraction here just to make it a little simpler to read. What is this resistor? This could be a light bulb. This could be just a fat piece of wire. This could be, well, fat piece of wire actually has less resistance. This could be just a resistor, which is literally just used to slow down current. But this could be any real-world device. This could be a laptop. This could be a phone. This could be anything. Everything has resistance. everything is kind of using some of that power. We tend to think of the wires as having zero resistance, so they're not really doing too much. But whenever you hear resistor in a problem, replace that with like something useful. Microwave, light bulbs, stuff like that. That'll kind of make these problems maybe a bit more applicable. Because most circuits have a purpose. Every circuit should have a purpose, otherwise that engineer just wasted someone's money. And so that purpose is usually to use this battery to do something. Make heat, make light. So this resistor, whatever it may be, is consuming every second 5/3 joules. Watts is how many joules used per second. So every second, 5/3 joules is being used for something. It's not being destroyed, it's being changed into something. That could be light, heat, sound, all sorts of things. Yeah?
Is that what you mean by the word loss?
Yes. The word lost means it's getting changed into something else. Yeah, it's gone. Yeah, so there was energy stored in the battery, chemical energy. We then use that to make electrical energy, and now we're using it for who knows what. Most commonly, resistors get hot, and it's most commonly heat. But if you're making a light bulb, you want something that actually just mainly converts it to light, in which case it would look almost identical. This doesn't tell us what it's being used for, though. So, all right. Here's another problem. This one, no picture, maybe a little bit easier because of that. What is the power loss in a 10 ohm resistor which has 5 microamps running through it? Oh, and I apologize, y'all. For some reason, I don't know how I would have missed this last time I taught it. I'm feeling like the answer's not here. So I'm going to I have to stop the stream too. Or secret option F. 2.5 times 10 to the minus 10 watts. Wow, I wonder what the answer is. It's crazy. I don't know how I missed this, but it's pretty easy to go. Still try to get that answer, though. Well, secret option B is now secret option F. Crazy, right? Wow. Yeah, my apologies there. Again, I don't know how that slipped by, but my mistake is your game, I guess. And we can try to see what mistake I made. That's always fun. How could I possibly have done that? Well, I have no idea. Yeah, that's how it is sometimes, right? All right. So while this is still up, let me just show you how to get that answer. So we are given 10 ohms. We are given 5 microamps, which is going to be 5 e to the minus 6 amps. We are solving for power still. And so we're going to use P equals I squared R, because that's what we're given, I and R. And so when we plug those in, we're going to get that 5 e to the minus 6 squared times 10, which will come out to that 2.5 e to the minus 10 watts. Which makes sense. It's a very, very small amount of power. Very, very small amount of current going through this. So when you have little current, you're not using much power. Current matters a lot when you talk about power. This is why LEDs are so efficient. LEDs barely use any current to run. Their resistance, I think, is fairly low, but more importantly, they don't need much current to actually light up, and that's beneficial. Whereas normal light bulbs require an okay amount. The mechanisms that they function with differ. I'm fairly certain one of the problems I gave you all compares those two. Let's see if that's right. Yeah, so when we get to that problem, I'll do a quick talk about how the different light bulbs work, just for those that are curious, but I won't spend that long on it. All right, great. So note for me to fix that. I'll do that for future classes. Your suffering is their gain. All right, so I'm going to close this out now. If you haven't answered this point, then oh, devastating. All right, well, not much I can do about that. All right, so let's go ahead and solve some more involved problems that are wordier, but at least the first ones, they're still not going to be that bad. So, find the current through a person and identify the likely effects on them if they touch a 120 volt AC source, and what would be the difference if they're standing on a rubber mat, which offers a total resistance of 300 kilo ohms, or if they're standing barefoot on wet grass with a resistance of only 4,000, that's a bigger number. Let's make that smaller so our answer actually makes some kind of sense. 4,500, that resistance is going to go down, not up. All right, and I'll double check that I didn't mess it up in the problem set. All right, so let's do our givens. I mean, if you want to draw a picture of a person, there's not much picture drawing here. If you really want to, there's a person, they're touching. I'm not going to draw, it's ridiculous. Not every problem involves a picture. When we talk about vectors, when we talk about charges in different locations, yes, but not every problem involves a picture. So, step one, every problem on the test can be drawn with a picture, though. So, the free response ones all can. So, voltage is 120. We have two different resistances. Let's just call one R1 and we'll call the other one R2, or we can call it RA because it's from part A, and RB because it's from part B. 300 kilo ohms, which is 300 times 10 to the 3 ohms, whereas the second one is 4,500 ohms. No unit conversion needed when I fix the units and make them actually make sense. All right, we're solving for current. It's a very simple problem. These problems may look intimidating because it's a paragraph, but the amount of words does not determine how difficult a problem is. That's a good thing to kind of keep in mind. It's a good thing to keep in mind on the test as well. When you're looking at the free response, don't just pick the one with the least words. Pick the one that you're the most confident in solving, even if it's got more words, or even if it seems more complex. All that matters is that you know how to do it. We're solving for the current through the first situation and the current through the second situation. We'll call that IA and IB. A for part A, B for part B. Step 3. See if you can figure out the right equation. Give you all a few seconds to think about it yourself. That's probably one of the hardest steps in solving a problem, is what equation should I use? Pro tip, find the equation with the variables that you have from step 1 and step 2. That's why we do step 1 and step 2. When you know what variables that you have, either the givens or the unknowns, you can find the equation that has all that stuff together. Or at least most of those pieces. We have B, we have R, we're missing I. There's only one equation that has all three of those together. It's going to be V equals IR. Ohm's law. V equals IR. Such a nice, simple equation. So we just plug and chug. So 120 is going to equal the current in the first situation times, you know what, I'm going to rearrange it so I don't have to keep doing the algebra every time. V equals IR. Let's solve for current just so I don't have to keep doing the algebra twice. Bam. Divide over the R, V, so I equals V over R. So now in both situations I can just plug and chug there. So IA is going to equal 120 over resistance A, which is 300 e to the third. IB is going to equal 120 over 4,500. Plug and chug, get an answer. And it says identify the likely effects. That is not something I'm going to test you on. I do not expect you to know how the human body handles current. So we are just going to see what Papa Google has to say about the amount of current a human body can be okay with. Which will be interesting if you all self-measures. What current is healthy? What current is not healthy? There's a certain amount of current that can flow through your body and it causes no problems. There is a certain amount of current that if it passes through your heart, that's really where the danger comes in. Student last class asked the really interesting question that you all probably heard. the debate about, is it voltage that kills or is it current that kills? Well, the answer there is a little nuanced, and basically, at a fundamental level, it's the current that kills. The current that runs through your heart. If a certain threshold is reached, it has a chance to stop your heart. However, to generate that current, you need a high voltage. So, you need a high voltage to make that current. So the current on a fundamental level is the thing actually causing it, but you need the voltage to make that current. So chicken and egg kind of deal maybe. All right, let's see what Google has to say. Google, how much energy, how much current can the body withstand? Current required to stop the heart. 1 to 4.3 amps. According to the first thing, which who knows if you can trust the first one, above 200 milliamps. Wow, these are all sorts of different answers. This is why you can't just read the first one that comes up. I am seeing 200 milliamps somewhere. I'm seeing 0.007 amps is enough to kill. I'm seeing 0.2 amps is enough to kill. So, I don't know why this answer is so varied on a whole bunch of different web sources. 50, we got two that say both 50 milliamps. Hydro-Quebec. I don't know if that's a trustworthy source. All right. It's not a huge deal. I'm not going to test you on that, but that may be a fun thing to explore. We can definitely see that if you're on wet grass, it makes more current and it's more likely to be dangerous. I think this 0.0004 was below all the thresholds we saw. That 0.0267 may or may not be dangerous depending upon which Google link you chose to be trustworthy. There you go. Doesn't take much though. That was the caveat. All those answers were basically in the milliamps. Doesn't take much to run through your body. Interesting thing about your all's body, your skin is very resistive. Your skin resists electricity a lot. It's a very good insulator. However, the second you get into your bloodstream, that is very conductive. That is a very low resistance. So, if you touch a voltage source and is touching it with your hands, that is less dangerous than if the voltage source somehow gets directly into your blood. Maybe an example of that would be like a taser, which if it got into your bloodstream, that could be potentially a bit more dangerous, depending on the ones that they kind of use. So, fun fact, if it gets in your bloodstream, that's more dangerous because the resistance is lower in your bloodstream, full of ions and all sorts of things. And your bloodstream is a really nice conductive wire for electricity to flow through, for good or for bad, depending on the application. Maybe that's useful in some health context. I don't know. All right, so there you go. Let's go ahead and do another problem, then we'll do one more where we can calculate our power bill. A heater is designed that uses a coil of nichrome wire to generate 300 watts using a voltage of 110 volts. The wire is a 14-gauge wire, which is spelled wrong, and therefore has a diameter... which A should I get rid of? Other one. And therefore has a diameter of 1.627 millimeters. How long should the engineer make the wire? This is where we're taking a concept from our last week, and we're taking the concept from this week. This is a two-part problem. This is a great example of one that would be like the free response in the test. Because there's going to be a couple concepts that we have to bring together. It's not a one-step problem. So, let's write down our givens. We have the resistivity of nichrome, which is, I'm going to guess, is a alloy of nickel and chrome, though I don't know that for sure. Doesn't matter. You don't need to know that. But it's resistivity. You don't have to have any resistivities written down. I've told you all this. If you need it for a problem, it will be given. Our wattage, our power is 300 watts. And our voltage is 110. That one's real nice. It actually even just had that written in the problem. V equals 110 volts. Something that if you've had challenges doing step one, the units are the key. If you see watts, it's power. If you see ohm meters, it's resistivity. If you see volts, it's voltage. The units tell you what variable it goes with. That's the reason they exist. We have a diameter of 1.627. I'm going to put there's no symbol for I don't want to mix up diameter with distance, so I'm going to write the word diameter. And we're going to see if that's the appropriate one to use. I'm going to go ahead and convert it so I don't have to write a little bit more. And it says the wire is 14 gauge. I will just tell you all, that just tells you how thick a wire is. So this is a good household thing. If you ever do anything with wires, when you buy a wire at a store, you don't buy it based on the millimeter, you buy it, they use gauge, and each gauge has a certain diameter to it. The lower the number, the bigger the diameter. I have no idea why it goes that way. So a 8 gauge wire would be thicker, have a bigger diameter. Fun fact. All right, step 2, what are we solving for? We are solving for the length. How long should the wire be? Okay. So how do we solve this problem? Well, step 3, I want you all to think of, again, I'm going to give you a few seconds, think of what equations may be relevant here. This is not a one-step problem, so that means there's going to be 2 equations. I'm giving you that hint straight up. There is no equation that has length, resistivity, power, voltage, and diameter all in one go. But there is only one equation with length in it, so that's a good kind of starting point. There's only one equation that has length in it. That could be a good kind of tip for solving the problem. It's nice when it works out that way. And again, this is a bit of a throwback. This is from last week, the equation that we're going to be using. Anyone find it? Yeah.
You can take V equals IR and make it into R equals V over I.
Okay.
Use R equals resistivity times length over area.
There we go. So our first step was we recognize there's only one equation with length, or we may recognize that V equals IR. So this one is mostly there, but there's one. We actually don't want to use V equals IR. We don't want to use V equals IR here because we do not know the current. We do not know the current anywhere in this problem, so this is good. So we do want the R equals rho L over A because it's the only one that has length in it. It's literally the only equation, so we have to use it. You don't have a choice. What equation do we use now? We can get resistance, or we can get length in terms of resistance. Is there an equation that relates resistance and maybe a couple other variables that are up here? What was it? P equals V squared over R. In our problem, we were given the power. So we have power, we have voltage, and resistance we can put in terms of the length. So this is the trickier, these are the kind of problems you may expect on the free response, where it's a couple steps involved. It's not just a one and done situation. How do we know how to do this? We first got an equation that had length in it. That related to resistance. Well, we don't know resistance. Is there a way we could calculate resistance given the equations we have up here? Given what we do have? Well, let's just rewrite this. In terms of resistance, I can punt the resistance to the other side and divide by power. I have voltage. I have power, so I can solve for resistance. And if I solve for resistance, I can take that and plug it back in here and solve for length. Because I have everything else. I have resistivity. I don't have the area, but I can calculate it. I got diameter. They're always circular wires. So that's the thought process you all want to be going through when you're solving these kind of problems. What are you solving for? What equation actually has that? Is there a variable in that I may need to solve beforehand? Yeah.
How do you find the area of like a foot?
It's a great, so in this case, the coil part doesn't actually matter. What matters is that the wire is circular, cross section. Because it doesn't matter, this is a good point, I don't have any wires over here that I can mess with without potentially messing up my setup. A wire that's bent is exactly the same as a wire that's straight, as far as resistance is concerned. That's a great question. A wire that's twisted and knotted, who cares? It will still work the same. So let's go ahead and move to step 4 and actually solve this problem. Copy everything over. And as well, if you're looking at this and you're like, there's no way I would have been able to figure that out, that's where just taking time on the problems comes in. And enough problems, once you've done enough problems, you'll start to recognize these kind of patterns. Hopefully you've already seen that for yourself. That at first the problem will look like you have no idea what to do. Once you do it a couple times, there's only so many styles of problems I can ask. And again, they're always going to be in the form of ones that you've already kind of solved. So once you've done enough practice problems, that'll help out. All right, so let's get that resistance first. Let's solve for resistance first. It's v squared over power. So that's going to be 110 squared over 300, and that's going to equal something. You'll notice that even when I plug it in, I am double checking that what I plugged in is that. I take a slight pause to make certain before I hit enter, because this is going to help reduce any chance of me making a mistake. Hopefully you all have seen me make enough mistakes to recognize that all of us make mistakes, and it's so easy to do as a human, even if you've been doing physics for years and years and years. And the quicker you try to move, the worse it gets. All right, so let's rewrite this equation a little bit. I'm going to write my area as pi r squared instead of a. And we're solving for length, so let me just go ahead and solve for length. I want length by itself. Let me make certain this is clear that this resistivity is being multiplied. It's not on the bottom. So to get length, first I can multiply the pi r squared over. So I have r times pi r squared equals rho times length. And then I can divide that rho on over. Just isolating the variable, doing it before I put any numbers in, because once you put numbers in, it's really easy to lose track of what is what. So I like to keep things in terms of variables. You're going to see me do this more and more as time goes on, is solve for my variable first, and then plug in my numbers, so that I give myself the best chance of keeping track of my work. The second you put in numbers, you're not going to remember what those numbers maybe went with. It'll be harder to track mistakes. Yeah.
So I apologize if this is difficult. The pi r squared I'm looking at, when I look at that, I think of like, if you were to take the wire and like chop it into very thin slices, like it's a circle.
Yes.
The whole thing.
Yes.
So why is it like that?
Why is it pi r squared? So when we talk about the area, it's the cross-sectional area. It's just like you said, if you took a slice of it, if we took a slice of our wire, it would look like, so here's kind of our wire. If we took a slice of it, the cross-sectional area, that's what we're considering.
Oh, I thought that's not.
No, that's a great question though. It's a cross-sectional area, so it's a circular wire. It'll always be pi r squared for all y'all's problems. So that's also helpful. All right, so we're going to plug in our numbers. And at this point, I'm going to do something that I maybe didn't point out before. So we have our r here. We have pi. I didn't give you, in step one, we don't have r equals anywhere, but we have diameter. Diameter over 2 is radius. So I'll specify that here. Diameter, r equals diameter over 2. I'll just kind of jot that down to this. How do I fit that in? I am just going to put that right here. Diameter over 2. Yeah, that's fine. I will write a little bit more to make it a little bit easier to understand. Diameter over 2 squared over, and since I'm not plugging all the numbers in, so radius is diameter over 2. All right, now I can put all my numbers in and get an answer. 40.33 times pi times, I'm not going to have space. All right. Times pi times 1.67627 e to the minus 3 over 2 squared over 100 e to the minus 8. And here's the beautiful part, y'all. Once you get it set up like this, if you have it set up like this, it'll be really easy for the grader to be able to give you a lot of points, even if you make a mistake on the last step. When you set it up as this final equation, and then you can just plug it into your calculator. 40.33 times pi times 1.627 e to the minus 3 divided by 2 squared divided by 100 e to the minus 8. And I can make a very long wire. Meters. Don't forget your unit. You will get knocked off some points if you forget the unit. Remember what you're solving for in the first place and use the appropriate unit. We're solving for length. Length is measured in meters. Done. So, again, I'm going to try to do things more in terms of variables like I did here. moving forward. So if this is maybe a bit confusing on how we're arranging these, please, after class, kind of look it over, come up and ask me questions, and I'll try to keep reinforcing, because I do believe that this is a better way of doing it in the sense of you're less likely to make mistakes. There's a reason almost every physics person or engineer person does things in terms of variables as long as possible, because it helps you reduce mistakes. That's really, and it's less writing. You don't have to write the numbers a million times. It's a lot easier to write the symbol rho than to write 100 e to the minus 8 times. So it's just more efficient as well. But do it however makes you feel comfortable. If you like putting in the numbers, put in the numbers. Go for it. Whatever makes it best for you, that's the best way to do it. All right, last problem. So finally, we get to calculate how your power bill is done. So I have to give you a quick kind of pre-word here. You are charged by the kilowatt hour. If you ever look at your power bill, you're going to see something like this. Kilowatt.hr. Why are you charged kilowatt hours? Well, let's just think through what a watt is. A watt is how much energy per second, energy per time. If I multiply that by time, let's just kind of write that logic out. This is energy, watts is energy over time. And if I multiply that by time, what are you getting charged for? You're getting charged for how much energy you used. That's why it's kilowatt hours. They don't charge you in terms of watts, because that's how much energy you use every second. They charge you kilowatt hours because that's how much energy you're using, and that's what they're selling. That's all electricity is liquid energy. So, on your power bill, you get charged a certain amount for every kilowatt hour. Every single device in your home that's connected to an outlet is using energy, and it's using a certain amount every second. In this problem, I have a 100-watt incandescent light bulb, so that's kind of the old school light bulbs. How do those work? They work by running electricity through them. The incandescent filament gets hot, and when it gets hot, it emits light. It's a very inefficient way to produce light, because I just said it gets hot. That's wasted energy. I assume no one in here is using incandescent light bulbs to heat up their home, especially not in Florida. So that heat is just wasted. In fact, it's even worse than wasted, because your house has to cool down more to account for that extra heat. So enter LEDs, the new age way of making light. LEDs are wonderful. How do they work? That gets a little more debate. You got these electrons at a higher energy level, and then they drop, and when they drop, they shoot out a photon. There's this holes that gets into semiconductors. I'm not going to spend necessarily the time on that. It's kind of outside of scope. But look it up. It's really interesting. The basic answer is that they're at a high energy level, and when they drop, that energy's got to go somewhere. It goes out as a photon. They do not produce like any heat, so they're super, and they barely use any current to make it happen. So not only do they produce light easier, but they don't waste any of that energy to heat. So LEDs are better in almost every single way. They take less energy, they last longer. I mean, that's basically the two big things you want in a light bulb. They last, and they're really bright, super bright too. Usually brighter than an incandescent, but maybe they don't have that nice, warm, glowy feel. Decide that's important to you. So, how do we actually calculate this? So go ahead and start working through this problem. This problem says I have an incandescent bulb, I have an LED. Both produce lumens. Is just a measure of how bright a light is. You don't need to know that. If I ever show you a variable and you haven't seen it before, you don't need it. And I give you the cost of electricity per kilowatt hour. I'm going to teach you all how, showing you how to kind of calculate. It's going to just happen by doing the problem. So what's given? We know that the power used by the incandescent light bulb, I'm going to just go with PI, I for incandescent. That's 100 watts. The power used by the LED, I'll use capital L for LED, is 16 watts. And near the end of the problem, the cost per kilowatt, so cost equals 0.10 per kilowatt hour. And it says we are running it for 1 year for 4 hours a day. We are running it for 1 year, so we have kind of this time variable. Good news, y'all. This question like this is not going to show up on the test. I got to double check if it shows up in the quiz. I don't know off the top of my head, but definitely not in the test. I'm mainly showing this to you all because this is one of the more practical applications of everything we've been covering. So how do we get time? Well, kilowatt hours, and it says 4 hours a day, and we're going to multiply that by 365 days in a year. That's going to give us our total hours. How many hours per day times number of days in a year. And that's going to give us how many hours that these have run for, because you're getting charged for every hour that they're getting used and the amount of energy they use per hour. So 4 times 365, that is the total number of hours used. 1,460 hours worth of use. Fun fact for you all, the things that use the most power in your house are the things that are running 24/7, because that means they're running 24 hours a day, and there's only a couple devices that are really running 24 hours a day in your house. Your air conditioner and your fridge. They also use just a lot of power as is. Those are the biggest cost sinks in your house. You can look at their wattage, you can calculate this yourself because they're running 24/7, maybe not at peak usage, but that's your biggest energy cost when you're paying your bills, is the AC and the refrigerator. All right, so 1,460 hours. Step 2, what are we solving for? How much does it cost? The total amount. Per kilowatt hour, just to specify. Okay? So, to solve this, here's how you basically get it. The cost equals the amount of kilowatts you're using times the amount of hours. That's it. The cost equals the power times hours. Now, I will clarify, this power is in kilowatts. So just get the kilowatts that each device is using, multiply by the hours, bam. Oh, one more thing. Times the dollars per kilowatt hour. This really matters because in the US, our cost per kilowatt hour is not too bad. I think in Europe, it's really high right now. So not only does it matter how efficient your stuff is, it matters what your power company is and how much they're charging you, just like everything. Look at this. Never thought you'd learn economics, did you? All right. Let's just kind of solve each of these and you'll see how it goes. So kilowatt hours is a funky kind of unit, but this is basically how you calculate it, how you calculate the cost. So if we look at the cost for the incandescent, we're going to take its power. We have to convert it. I'm going to actually do that over here. 100 watts is 0.1 kilowatts. And maybe I can write that a little different to make it a bit more clear. It's kind of the opposite conversion. Maybe I make it 100 e to the minus 3. And I still didn't move that over enough. Cost. E to the minus 3 kilowatts. So it's the opposite conversion. Normally we like to keep things as base unit, but because these are kilowatt hours, we have to convert it. So this one is 16 times 10 to the minus 3 kilowatts. It's a small one. So if we went from kilowatts to watts, we multiply by 10 to the positive 3. If we go from watts to kilowatts, it's 10 to the minus 3. It's the opposite. All right. So just plug and chug. 100 times 10 to the minus 3 times 1,460 times 0.1. That's the cost of the incandescent bulb. I'm going to pretty much copy all this over and do it on the other one. 100 e to the minus 3 times 1460 times 0.1. So this one light bulb is costing you $14.60 every year. Maybe it's more than you expect, maybe it's less than you expect. A 100-watt light bulb is not maybe uncommon. Let's just Google real quick. I actually don't know what the average incandescent light bulb, Home Depot. Let's see what the average one that pops up is. There you go, great. Oh, what a bargain. 40 watt, 60 watt, 25 watt. Look, it tells you how much energy they're using. They average around 50. So maybe the average incandescent bulb, if you are running it, and your energy bill is 0.10, I don't know what the exact, it's like 0.7 current, maybe 7 cents instead of 10 cents per kilowatt. You'd have to check your power bill. I honestly don't know off the top of my head. I have auto pay set up, so I probably don't do as good of a job at that as I should. But maybe $7 a year for every light bulb you're running, if you're running it for 4 hours a day. Maybe that's good news to you, maybe that's bad. I don't know. Depends on your perspective. Let's do the LED and just see the cost savings. Why should you switch all your light bulbs to LEDs? Here's an argument for it. Do the same thing. We take our power in terms of kilowatts. So our cost for our LED, give myself more space. Our cost for the LED is going to be how much power it uses, converted to kilowatts, 16e to the minus 3, times how many hours it gets used in a year, because we're calculating the cost per year. If you're just calculating the cost per day, you would just use 4. If you wanted to see how much this costs you every single day, it runs for 4 hours, so I would just put 4. But we had to convert to how many hours it's used every year. Times 0.1, and I can use the exact same equation and just replace that 100 with a 16. And then my calculator kind of dies. $2.33. Look at that. What a long story short. If you took that 16 divided by 100, that gives you the ratio of how much cheaper it is. That's kind of a benefit of ratio problems like this, when everything else is the same. 1/7 the cost. If it uses 1/7 the power, it costs you 1/7 the amount of money. Makes sense. It's nice. So, this is the benefit of having less wattage. When you are looking at devices for your house and you're wondering how much it's going to cost to run, now you know to look at wattage. Maybe you didn't know that, maybe you did, I don't know. There's a few problems like this. They're basically all the same idea. How many hours does it run? Multiply it by the kilowatts. Multiply by the cost per kilowatt hour. Done. All right. So, maybe it took me a little bit longer. It works out fine. We still have all day Tuesday. So I'm going to start working on that note card. It'll probably take me, so it took me 50 minutes to make this last time I did it. Kind of crammed it into 50 minutes. So we'll get through a good amount of it today, and then we'll finish up the rest, and we'll still have probably 50 minutes or so to do random problems on Tuesday. So, let's get started. How am I going to do this note card up here? I am going to take a PowerPoint slide. I'm going to delete everything on it, and I'm going to size it to 5 by 8. So that way that you know that the thing I am making is the exact same size as yours. So design, custom slide size. It's going to be a 8 width by 5 high. Who cares? Bam. There's my note card. I'm going to make 2 of them. There they are. There's the front and back. So, I am going to design. You do not have to have the exact same design as mine. I am going to organize mine by the weeks that we covered the content. Why? Because this will make your life easy. If you're solving for electric field, you'll go to the electric field section. If you're solving for force, you'll go to the force section. If you solve for capacitors, go to the capacitor section. That'll help reduce what equations to look at. Instead of having a giant list of equations with no labels, you have little subsections on here. Again, I can't promise this is going to be beautiful. That's why I don't recommend you copy this down at the same time I do, because I'm kind of exploring how much space. I have my example one up here, but I may add things as I go on. So, first thing we covered. I'm literally using the headings from the problem set. Charges of electric force. Great. That's going to be our first section. So I'm going to title that. Oh, that's too big. And I'm going to zoom in as well. So that way it's big enough for you all to see, but when we zoom in at the end of the day, charges and electric force. And actually, before I even begin that, I'm going to do all of my constants. Every single one of my constants, every single one of my SI units, let's put those on this side. What are all the constants that you need to know? You need to know K, 9E9. It's got some units after it. That's not a big deal. I mean, you're not going to end up using that, but I'll put it there. So you need to know K. K is equal to 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught. So I can put that here if I want to, but whatever. You need to know epsilon naught. 8.854 times 10 to the minus 12. When I first was teaching this class with you all, I did not have some of these memorized. And by nature of teaching you all it, I remembered them. I had these things memorized 7 years, 10 years, whatever I took the classes I had memorized. I'm a physics major. I was a physics major because my memory is trash, so I forgot them. But then by reteaching them, I remembered them again. So you all may already have these memorized, but it's always better to be safe than sorry. We have the charge of a proton, which is equal, we'll put them both here, sure. Protons are positive, so that's 1.6 times 10 to the minus 19 coulombs. Charge of an electron, same thing, but with a negative. These are all the constants I'm giving you are ones that you all have used in problems probably like 10, 15 times by now. The mass of an electron, the mass of a proton, 1.67 times 10 to the minus 27 kg. 9.11 times 10 to the minus 31 kilograms. Okay? I'm not going to give you these in a problem, just like I haven't been giving you them in problems. So these are ones you're going to want to have written down on here. If you do not bring a note card, if you somehow forget yours or something, I will have a standard formula sheet just like you're used to probably in all your other physics classes. It will not be organized. It will literally just have, it will have the constants, it will have the equations, but they will not be organized in any particular way. But that way at least you're not going to mess up on your quiz because you accidentally left your note card at home. Yeah.
Is it okay to assume that when we are using mass with proton and mass of electron, that's only in the context of electric potential energy?
Oh, and I mix these up too. No one told me on that. Oh, terrible. There we go. Oops. Sorry.
So when we look at just like the context, like when we are dealing with mass,
yeah,
it's only for electric potential energy, right?
Yep, that's the only time it really comes up. Yep, that's the only time that I recall using it. So, all right, so there's our constants, and I'm going to put my SI units below this because I can. I'm going to upload all this as well. So whatever I put on mine, this thing will be digitally uploaded. So we have mega. We've seen that before in a couple problems. That's e to the 6. So if you want to convert, I'm literally just putting what you put after the number to convert it. So my things I'm adding here are what you put after the number to convert it to the base units. If I want to convert from kilo to, say I have kilometers to meters, I multiply by 10 to the 3. If I want to convert from milli, that's e to the minus 3. I'm putting all the ones that we've seen in this class so far. There's more than these. Ooh, let's put centimeters in here too. Why not? We've seen centimeters a couple times. C for centa equals e to the minus 2. Micro, that's e to the minus 6. And then we have nano. We're almost there. We got one more that we've seen one time, e to the minus 9. And we have pico, itty bitty, e to the minus 12. All right. These are the only ones you'll end up seeing. So these are all the ones you need to know. Maybe you already have them memorized. Probably do. But better safe than sorry. Why are we putting it on the formula sheet? So that you don't panic. And that you don't miss the problem because you accidentally forgot slightly. This is a peace of mind thing. You all are probably going to find that you're going to know the equations without even needing to look at the formula sheet. But you'll have this just in case you're like, is it squared? Is it not squared? I'll just look at this real quick and remind myself. You all probably realize this at that point, that at some point you didn't need to keep looking at equations. All right, great. So now we got all our constants. Now we can get to the actual sections. And I'm going to use dotted lines to kind of separate my sections. Again, do whatever you want on yours. Color them different colors. Do what you want. But I'm going to use dotted lines to keep everything separated. I told you all, mine's not going to be as beautiful as yours is going to be. Maybe it will be, but probably not. All right, so our first section, electric, I think it says charges in electric force was the exact order. So we're going to put everything to do with charges and electric force in here. One of the first things that we want to remember, so some of the things I'm going to put in here are kind of major concepts. Opposites attract, like charges repel. This doesn't show up in any of the math, but it's extremely important. So when we have things like this, major concepts that are going to matter, especially when you do vectors, I'll put stuff like that on my note card as well. You don't have to put it on yours, but it may help. So then we draw kind of a quick picture. This may be helpful. So we have our positive charge, we have our negative charge. Those are going to experience a force towards each other. If I have two positives, and if this is something you feel pretty confident about, you don't need to include it on yours. I'm just putting it here because it is a major concept we covered. Put only on your note card what you think is useful. So especially when I'm talking about concepts here. If you feel like you got that down, don't waste space on it. Something important here is remember Newton's third law for every force. There's an equal and opposite force. That was one of the first clicker questions we did, where I said, hey, I have two charges, one's bigger than the other. It didn't matter. For every force, they're equal and opposite. So if that first pairing, if that positive charge experiences 5 newtons, so does the negative charge. Equal and opposite. Does not matter anything else. And why is that? Because our equation is just multiplication. So our equation, what's our equation for the force due to point charges? K, and we're going to put our absolute values in here, over r squared. Don't forget the squared. Don't forget the squared. When you're doing force, there's a squared there. In fact, I'm going to rewrite it and make that squared even bigger. Let's make it, I don't want to make it comically big. Okay, I'm going to make it a little comically big. Because if you all make a mistake on this, this is a good chance that's the mistake you make. Forget to square the bottom. For force, the bottom's squared. For electric fields, the bottom is squared. For potential, it's not. If it's vectors, the bottom gets squared. All right. There is one more equation we want to put here, and that is that the net charge equals the number of protons minus the number of electrons times 1.6 times 10 to the minus 19. And this is where I remind you all, this is just saying how many extra charges do I have and of what type? How many extra charges? Make up an example if you want. If I have 8 protons and 5 electrons, 8 minus 5 is 3, I have 3 extra protons. If I have 8 electrons and I have 5 protons, 5 minus 8 is negative 3. I have 3 extra electrons, it makes it negative. So that parentheses is just calculating the extra charges. That parentheses is just calculating the extra charges. So if you want, you can just replace that with Q net equals extra charges times 1.6 times 10 to the minus 19. Whatever you have extra of. Go back and kind of look at a couple of the problems we did there if you're confused in what I'm talking about. Yeah?
When is R not squared?
R won't be squared when we do voltage. Voltage was KQ1. We'll get when we get to that section. KQ1 or Q2 over R. For force, it's always squared. Yeah. All right. That was the first section. Woo! That's everything we covered our first week. Way back when we first met each other. What a special moment that was. Look back fondly on those days and all the problems you've solved since. What a friendship we formed. All right, let's go to step 2. So we have forces, we have charges. Great, good job. On to electric fields. So we introduced the idea of charges, and we said, hey, these things repel, these things attract, we can get that force. What's causing it? A field. We introduced the idea of electric field, and we said it had units of newtons per coulomb. So if you see newtons per coulomb, that's the unit for field, for electric field. And first we just said, all right, which way do these fields point? If we have a positive charge, I'm going to make these a little smaller as well. If we have a positive charge, the electric field points away, always. Electric field points away from, let's write that in words and then I'll draw the pictures for it. E field points away from positive charge and towards negative charge. The electric field points away from a positive charge and towards a negative charge. So if I have a positive charge and I say, which way does the electric field point here? Boom, that way. It's a vector, so I'll put a little tiny hat above it. If I have a negative charge and I consider the exact same point and give myself space because the electric field points towards it. The electric field points the direction a positive charge would move. The electric field points the direction a positive charge would move. Okay, we'll probably add that over here to the right. Again, this is where things are going to get a little funky. I kind of ran out of space there, so guess what? I'm using this part here, and then 3 is going to be above it. This is why I warned you all, you're going to want to kind of rearrange things as you see fit. I can't predict how this is going to go, so I do it this one time, and then you all can puzzle piece it how you want. So, next is we said that the force is the electric field generated by one of the charges. Let's just keep it simple. It's just the electric field at that point multiplied by the charge at that point. And if you'd like, we'll put an absolute value there. Because when we're talking about vectors, we didn't put positives and negatives in. You define the positives and negatives, the direction, by these concept rules. So the force is that, and we'll put that here. Positive charges, force is in direction of field. Negative charges, F is opposite of field. We'll draw a beautiful picture of that. So if I have a field pointed to the right, there's my field, a positive charge and a negative charge. In that same field, the positive charge will go this way, the negative charge will go this way. If you have a charge in a field, positive charge will go with the field, negative charge will go the other way. And then we introduce the idea that you can, how to actually calculate the field, KQ over R squared. If you want to find the field due to a point charge, the electric field, and I'll kind of clarify this under it, E due to a point charge. So if I want to find, we'll make this absolute value, if I want to find the electric field at some distance R, at some point, there doesn't need to be anything there. I'm not finding force, I am finding the electric field. Electric field doesn't need there to be a force, doesn't need there to be a charge there. I can find the field anywhere. The second I put a charge there, that charge will experience a force due to that field. E times Q. 2 weeks done. Moving quicker than I expected. All right. Tied in with electric fields. This is kind of 2 continued. We'll shove it up here in the corner. 2 continued. We had a few more equations for electric fields. I'm not able to fit them there. So again, I warned you all. This is going to happen. 2 continued. We introduced something called flux. Yeah, a lot of things to talk about during this week. It was a popular week. We had something called flux. And the electric flux was the electric field, the magnitude of the electric field times the magnitude of the area vector times cosine of theta. So if we had an electric field pointed to the right, and we had a plane, ooh, how am I going to draw this beautifully? Probably not. That's probably the answer there. This plane has an area vector. I'm trying to think of how to draw a 2-dimensional shape. Oh, that's a good one. All right, there's my area vector. Remember, the area vector is perpendicular. Let's just say there's an electric field this way. Doesn't matter what direction it is. All I want to show you is that the angle is the angle between those two. So if you're finding flux, you do the electric field times the area times the angle between them. How do you get area? Length times width. It's usually a square thing. Okay, there'll be 3 more equations. We'll put electric field, and that'll probably give us a good stopping point for today. We had 3 more electric field equations. We had a line of charge. So the electric field due to a line of charge, I'm just going to write the word line, was lambda over 2 pi epsilon naught r, where lambda was the total charge over the length. So I have a wire. I want the electric field here, distance r, and this thing has a length L and a net charge Q. So that's the E for a line. We had E for a plane of charge, which was sigma over 2 epsilon naught. So if you have a plane, and I want to find the electric field anywhere, it doesn't matter where. Sigma here is Q over area. And then we have a sphere. Sphere had 2 equations. If you're in the sphere, if you're inside, En was K capital Q R over R cubed. Beautify that a bit, and I'll zoom in so it's easier to see. That is not easier to see. It's very angry. Yeah, so unfortunately, the more writing I do in this thing, the more PowerPoint gets angry with me. So things may get a little bit laggier. Turns out it takes a lot of storage, I guess, to map all these different drawings I'm doing. If you are out of the sphere, it is just K, Q, I'm going to just shove it down here, over R squared. So here's my sphere. If you are inside of it, a distance R, that's the one you use. If you're outside of it, a distance R, that's the one you use. Yeah. Let me scroll up.
For the one above it, for n, you put a big R. Is that
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me add that to the picture. R is the radius of the sphere. Little r is the distance, big R is the radius.
And big Q is
Net charge. Because we're talking 3-dimensional objects that have a net charge in them. So if I want, I could just like put a Q, Q, Q. They all have a net charge. So the problem may say, hey, here's the charge distribution, or the problem may say, hey, here's the net charge. In which case you have to use it probably. All right, yeah, that's good for now. Half the page done. Electric field had a lot of equations. Next time, we'll do potential energy. We'll do capacitors and resistors. We'll do V equals IR, P equals IB. That's a lot we've covered, but the beautiful thing is, on a test problem, if you see the word force, you don't need to look at your whole thing. Just look right here. Bam. That's all you need. If you see the word electric field, bam. You only need to look here. If you see the word, there's nothing else we've covered so far. So, that's why we break it into pieces. Should make it easier for y'all. If you have any questions, come on up. I'm going to save this now so I don't have to redo it all later. That would be devastating. Goodbye, online people.